about
But there was a time people stuck around. It's amazing the change around that man. Amazing. Thank you, Nicole. If it's Wednesday, little lies, big problems. Good evening. I'm Chuck Todd here in Washington, and welcome to MTP Daily. And we begin tonight with an absolute deluge of breaking news on the gun debate, Russia, White House chaos, and in the increasing isolation of Donald Trump in the presidency. His communications director, Hope Hicks, is resigning. This is the day after she reportedly told congressional investigators that she's lied for President Trump, though she claimed they were just white lies. His Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, is firing back at him today after being insulted by the president, who suggested Sessions this morning isn't giving him enough cover on the Russia investigation. His son-in-law / top advisor Jared Kushner has just lost his access to highly sensitive intelligence, as White House advisors privately sounded the alarm over his foreign contacts. His campaign chief, one-time campaign chief, Paul Manafort, was just hit with more criminal charges. His one-time deputy campaign chief, Rick Gates, has just flipped in special counsel Bob Mueller's probe. We're going to have more breaking news on his investigation coming up. The president's staff secretary just recently quit following allegations that he committed spousal abuse. Another member of the White House communications team, Omarosa, just recently left to be on Big Brother. And all of that is just in the past few weeks. Most of it actually in the past few days. And don't forget, his bodyguard, somebody who's been with him forever, and Director of Security Keith Schiller, also has left him. That was a move that John Kelly made fairly early in his tenure. And the chief strategist, Steve Bannon, left just a few weeks prior to that. Then there's the Deputy National Security Advisor, Dina Powell. She just recently left. Anyway, you get the drift. Folks, we sometimes get lost in the craziness of this White House moment to moment, that sometimes it's hard to see the forest through the trees. But look at what you might call that casualties list of advisors and think about it in the span of about a 90-day period. Some have been with him from the beginning. Others more recently joined the team. But add them all up, and you might wonder if it's a case of abandoned ship involving the president's inner circle. Let me go to our chief White House correspondent, Hallie Jackson. This big news, she's inside the briefing room. I have to say, Hope Hicks leaving the president, if there were people that I might nominate as turning the lights off on the last day that Donald Trump was in office, she would have been in my final five. What happened?
Partly, Chuck, because she was there turning the lights on before Donald Trump even announced that he was going to think about running for president way back in the day. She's been by his side from the very beginning. I'm here in the briefing room because we've been running back and forth doing some reporting, and I want to share with you some new information that we've learned. So we know that Hope Hicks is leaving the White House. We know from White House officials that is going to happen sometime.
Was misleading.
Right. That's why there were so many questions surrounding her appearance in front of the House Intelligence Committee yesterday, because Hope Hicks knows so much. She has been there for the president. She helps him draft statements and all of those things. And she certainly has played a large role in the campaign and in this White House. So it's incredibly significant that she's leaving. But it's also incredibly significant that she did not answer those questions surrounding the drafting of that statement, which initially said that meeting was about adoption, not about getting dirt on Hillary Clinton. But she certainly has been there from day one with everyone in this White House.
But the timing of this announcement is amazing, coming the day after she spent 9 hours behind closed doors answering questions, refusing to answer some questions about her time in the White House before members of the House Intelligence Committee. The timing is awkward, to put it mildly.
Certainly, and this is very surprising to a lot of people in the White House. I can't overstate just how surprising this is. Very few people knew, but clearly the White House was ready to go with their statements from her, from Hope Hicks, from the president, from several officials, ready to go once the New York Times did break this story. But this is certainly stunning to a lot of people in the West Wing.
And
that
her
are close
acknowledgement
to
that she told some white lies in the course of her job as the director of communications and earlier in the campaign on behalf of the president. We don't know what those white lies are, but everybody, all the serious journalists in Washington are looking to find out what those, quote, white lies were. Caitlin, stand by. I want to quickly go back to the White House. The president focusing in on gun control today as the Russia investigation continues to take a heavy toll on his White House. I want to bring back our chief White House correspondent, Jim Acosta, to bring us up to date. What's the latest, Jim?
Well, we thought this was going to be the most remarkable thing to happen at the White House today, Wolf, and that was this frank exchange that the president had with lawmakers from both parties inside the White House about the issue of gun control. At one point, the president told a Republican lawmaker, "You're afraid of the NRA," but the lawmakers were also dishing back at the president, insisting to him that unless he stands up to the NRA, nothing will get done.
We have to act.
This time, President Trump promised new gun control measures are on the way. But first, he professed his love to the lawmakers from both parties gathered at the White House.
I see some folks that don't say nice things about me, and that's okay. Because if you turn that into this energy, I'll love you. I don't care.
The president then vowed action is coming, first on the use of bump stocks, attachments that effectively turn semi-automatic rifles into machine guns.
I'm going to write that out, and we'll have that done pretty quickly.
Mr. Trump then reaffirmed his interest in raising the age limit to 21 for purchasing some firearms after some waffling from the White House on the issue.
I think it's something you have to think about.
We just signed that.
So I'll tell you what, I'm going to give it a lot of consideration.
Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein showed the president data that shows how the assault weapons ban passed in the 90s cut down on gun deaths.
When it ended, you see it going up.
Okay.
Also on the table was the influence of the National Rifle Association, the powerful gun lobby closely tied to the president.
I'm the biggest fan of the Second Amendment. Many of you are. I'm a big fan of the NRA, but I had lunch with them, with Wayne and Chris and David on Sunday, and said, it's time. We got to stop this nonsense. It's time.
The reason that nothing has gotten done here is because the gun lobby has had a veto power over any legislation that comes before Congress.
On the proposal to expand background checks sponsored by Senators Joe Manchin and Pat Toomey, the president criticized the measure's GOP sponsor Toomey as fearful of the NRA.
You know why? Because you're afraid of the NRA, right?
The president also made the stunning comment that people with mental health issues should have their firearms confiscated.
A lot of times, by the time you go to court, it takes so long to go to court to get the due process procedures. I like taking the guns early. Take the guns first, go through due process second.
The president staged the gun discussion as the West Wing is still trying to get a handle on why so many of its top aides lack top-secret security clearances. Mr. Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, recently had his clearance status downgraded from top secret to secret. But CNN has learned other White House staffers have been notified their clearances were bumped down as well. That's despite promises from the president during the campaign to properly handle classified material.
This was not just extreme carelessness with classified material, which is still totally disqualifying. This is calculated, deliberate, premeditated misconduct. If elected, Hillary Clinton would become the first president of the United States who wouldn't be able to pass a background check.
Another headache for the president appears to be Attorney General Jeff Sessions and his handling of alleged abuses in the Russia investigation. The president tweeted, "Why is AG Jeff Sessions asking the Inspector General to investigate? Will take forever. Why not use Justice Department lawyers? Disgraceful." Sessions announced he's letting the Justice Department's Inspector General to look into it.
We believe the Department of Justice must adhere to the highest standards in the FISA court. And yes, it will be investigated. And I think that's just the appropriate thing. The Inspector General will take that as one of the matters he'll deal with.
Today, Sessions fired back at the president's tweet with a blunt statement. "As long as I am the Attorney General, I will continue to discharge my duties with integrity and honor, and this department will continue to do its work in a fair and impartial manner according to the law and Constitution." Now, getting back to the gun discussion over here at the White House, Wolf, we should also point out that the president at times during that meeting seemed to show that he did not have much of a command over the gun issue. At one point, he indicated he did not know what the Manchin-Toomey bill entailed, when, of course, most people in Washington know it's about expanding background checks. At one point, the president went on to say that Barack Obama, the former president, did not do enough to advance that legislation. That is simply not the case. President Obama, as we know, after the Sandy Hook massacre up in Connecticut, advocated strongly for the passage of that bill. It did not garner enough votes in the Senate Senate, including some red state Democrats who voted against that legislation. At another point during the gun discussion over here at the White House, Wolf, the president seemed to say that had there been an armed person inside the Pulse nightclub massacre down in Orlando a couple of years ago, that was a result of that would have resulted in perhaps fewer lives being lost if somebody inside that nightclub had been armed. Wolf, you can go back and look at the details from that massacre. There was an armed police officer who was off duty, but there on the scene, and certainly could have been somebody who made a difference. He tried to exchange gunfire with that gunman at that time, but it was not enough. So the president seemed to be a little bit off in terms of his information on that. And at the same time, Wolf, we should also point out the president has had discussions like this with lawmakers before. Remember, it was in January, early January, when the president had a discussion with lawmakers from both parties about the issue of DACA, the Deferred Action Program for immigrants who came into this country as children. The president said during that meeting that he could take the heat, that he wanted to have lawmakers give him a bill. The result of that meeting was essentially nothing. They had that discussion, but no legislation was passed, and the president ever since then has blamed Democrats for failing to take action on that issue. Wolf.
Jim Acosta with the very latest at the White House. Thank you. There's more breaking news we're following. President Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, pleaded not guilty today to the latest charges from the special counsel Robert Mueller, including money laundering, conspiracy, and making false statements about his foreign lobbying. He faces a trial date in September. Let's go to our chief national security correspondent, Jim Sciutto. Jim, we're also learning that Mueller may be looking more closely into Trump-Russia ties in the years leading up to his run for president.
That's right. Myself and my colleagues were told by a number of sources aware of questions asked of witnesses before the special counsel that he is now asking questions about Trump's activities, business activities, travel to Russia in 2013 and 2014 before he formally announced his run for president. And among the things they've been asking about there are specific business deals, including the 2013 Miss Universe pageant, as well as unsuccessful discussions to brand a Trump Tower Moscow, extending the questions and the lines of inquiry of the special counsel to prior to the campaign actually started. Keep in mind, the special counsel's remit is not only to investigate Russian meddling in the election, but also ties between Trump associates and Russians, and by that remit, anything that may also come up over the course of the investigation that's relevant, and that's where he's going now. One of the key questions is, due to these business dealings and due to the fact that they happened at the same time that the president was making a decision about running for president, it raises the question as to whether Russia was attempting to exert any influence over the president as he was making that decision.
Because, as you point out, some questions have touched on the possibility of what is described as compromising information that the Russians may have or claim to have about President Trump.
That's right. I was told by a source that one of the witnesses was interviewed, asked questions about that compromat, as it is known in Russian, compromising information that Russia claims to have. That does not mean that information is corroborated or confirmed, but questions being asked there. And I should mention, of course, that the first we heard about that compromising information or the possibility that Russians may have it or threaten to have it was in what's known as the Steele dossier, this collection of memos put together by a former British intelligence agent. And we should mention that the money behind that dossier was basically opposition research, and it was at the time paid for by the Democratic National Committee and others supporting the candidacy of Hillary Clinton.
Jim Sciutto with the very latest. Thanks very much. Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Hakeem Jeffries of New York. He's a member of the Judiciary Committee. Congressman, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Wolf.
Let me get back to the breaking news. The White House Communications Director, Hope Hicks, resigning. Do you believe the resignation is related to this overall Russia investigation?
Absolutely. You know, another day, another scandal, another resignation in the Trump White House. What else is new? What we've seen from the very beginning of this administration is nothing but chaos, crisis, and confusion. And of course, her resignation is related to the fact that just yesterday she was before the Intelligence Committee and acknowledged telling lies on behalf of the Trump administration.
She called them white lies.
She called them white lies, but they're still lies to the American people. That in and of itself is disqualifying.
You think that in and of itself?
Well, I think largely she was one of Donald Trump's closest associates throughout the campaign and into the administration. And the evidence continues to mount that there was an apparent conspiracy between some members of the Trump campaign and Russian spies to sell out our democracy and then engage in a possible cover-up. And Hope Hicks appears to be connected to all of those particular elements. That ultimately may be the reason why she's out of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Apparently, according to the reports, she's been thinking about this for a while. But the curious thing is the announcement was made a day after 9 hours of testimony by her behind closed doors before the House Intelligence Committee. We're continuing to dig on that. Let's get through some other issues while I have you, Congressman. Is digging into President Trump's business dealings, prior business dealings before he became a candidate for president, is that fair game for the special counsel, Robert Mueller?
Absolutely. What you have is three different elements of this criminal investigation. You have the money laundering that may have taken place prior to the campaign. You have the possible criminal conspiracy that took place during the campaign to undermine our democracy in partnership with Russian spies. And then you have the obstruction of justice that took place afterward. In order to get to the criminal conspiracy, you have to understand motive and intent. And a possible motive and intent was a pre-existing relationship with people closely associated with Russia, possibly engaged in money laundering, which would be a criminal violation. If that, in fact, did occur, that may provide a link to the actual collusion that subsequently took place during the campaign.
Yeah, he has said in that interview in the New York Times a few months ago that any investigation by Mueller of his personal financial business dealings long before he became a candidate, that would cross a red line, should be inappropriate. But I want to get to some other issues. You're on the Judiciary Committee. The president really went after the Attorney General of the United States, Jeff Sessions, today. I'll read the tweet. He put it up there. This is an official presidential statement. Why is the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, asking the Inspector General at the Justice Department to investigate potentially massive FISA abuse, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act abuse? Will take forever, has no prosecutorial power, and already late with reports on Comey, et cetera. Isn't the IG, he did a terrible thing and now disgraceful, all caps, with an exclamation point. Those are comments the president has made, yet Sessions continues on the job. Some are suggesting the president has done that. He wants him out so he can name someone else who would be more supportive, shall we say.
Well, this actually may be part of a continuing pattern to obstruct justice and to shape the Mueller investigation in a manner that could inure to Trump's benefit. That would be problematic. What I also find problematic, Wolf, is the fact that Donald Trump is attacking his own attorney general, one of his best friends, closest allies, on the campaign trail, his earliest endorser from the United States Senate. He's attacked our allies in this country, attacked Great Britain, attacked Canada, attacked France, attacked Germany, attacked Mexico, attacked Australia. He can't say a single negative word about Vladimir Putin. That fundamentally is the problem. And his back and forth with Jeff Sessions illustrates the dramatic double standard that he has.
Yeah. Well, Hakeem Jeffries, thanks as usual for coming in. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
There's breaking news we're following. The White House Communications Director Hope Hicks is stepping down a day after being grilled by lawmakers in the Russia probe, stonewalling when questioned about her time in the White House. And President Trump stuns lawmakers by seeming to embrace some strict gun control measures.
Mr. President, it's going to have to be you that brings the Republicans to the table on this, because right now the gun lobby would stop it in its tracks.
I like that responsibility, Chris. I really do. I think it's time. It's time that a president stepped up.
The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer, brought to you by Otesla. Learn